length aggregation अक्षय पुनः length aggregation line थी होना figure को देखा then तनी आगे 80 हो सकता
Ravin, sir, can you hear me clearly now?
Yes, I can.
Right, and we can also hear you very well. So, Ravindraji, I think we should start now.
Okay. Manoj, Manoj, you are getting?
No, sir. Yes, we are live now. You may start.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the IQAC team, ARSD College, the Department of English, I welcome everyone to the 8th Basant Satpathy Memorial Lecture. This edition of the event, as you can see, is being hosted by ARSD College in collaboration with Pakshighar Prakashini Bhubaneswar. A couple of words about the college. We are accredited A by NAAC, and we are the 13th best college among all other colleges in the country. We have been ranked 13th in the NIRF ranking. And might I add, without any sweet exaggeration, that a lot of credit for our present position goes to our principal. So I'll request him to join us and formally welcome all the participants who have joined today's webinar from different parts of the country. May I now request Dr. Gyantosh Kumar Jha, our principal, to formally welcome the participants of today's webinar.
Thank you, Gautam. On behalf of Atmaram Sanatan Dharma College, IQSC of the college and the organizing team, it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome you all the dignitaries who are present in this webinar and in this 8th Basant Satpathy Memorial Lecture. I formally welcome Honorable Sri Anant Mahapatra, who is chair for this session, eminent theatre personality. I welcome Professor Mala Srilal. She is keynote speaker and she is going to deliver her lecture on Sri Radha and Unfinished Story. I welcome Sri Chandrahas Chaudhary, renowned novelist, in this program. I welcome Professor Sumanyu Satpathy, all the important personalities, all the guests, all the participants in this program. On behalf of college and IQSC team, I express my gratitude to Professor Sumanyu Satpathy, who has given us this opportunity to collaborate with Pakshighar Prakashan and organize this 8th Basant Satpathy Memorial Lecture. It's an honor and privilege for all of us. I thank him, and once again, on behalf of the college family, I welcome you all. Thank you so much. Over to Gautam.
Thank you, sir. Little reflection on the event. During the last 7 years, the memorial lectures were delivered by such great writers and scholars as Padma Bhushan Manoj Das, Professor Muhammad Asaduddin of Jamia Millia Islamia, the diplomat turned politician and always a man of letter, Pawan Verma, Professor Rosinka Chaudhary of CSSC, Harprasad Das, Sahitya Academy winning Odia poet, leading Kannada playwright Professor Shiv Prakash, Padma Shri Professor Priyambada Mohanty Hejmadi, and Professor Sachidanand Mohanty, one of the India's foremost scholars. The first 6 memorial lectures were organized by Shiksha Sandhan Bhubaneswar. This year, Pakshighar Prakashini has collaborated with Atmaram Sanatan Dharma College for the event. The next stage of the preliminary is welcoming our esteemed panel today. And like I always say, they need no introduction, but nevertheless, we need to read their bio notes because they're so inspiring. They tell us about the possibilities of human endeavor. They tell us about the possibilities of scholarly endeavor. And for that reason, I'll take you through their bio notes, although they, like I said, need no introduction. We are joined today by Sri Manoj Kumar Tripathi, who is a successful entrepreneur, a bibliophile, and the proprietor of Pakshighar Prakashini, Bhubaneswar. And in that capacity, he has contributed immensely to the growth, progress, and diversification of modern Odia literature. We are also joined today by Sri Chandrahas Chaudhary, one of the most powerful voices in contemporary Indian English fiction. He grew up in Bombay and received his education at the universities of Delhi and Cambridge. He has penned 3 novels, R.Z. the Dwarf, Clouds, and Days of My China Dragon. R.Z. the Dwarf was shortlisted for the Commonwealth First Book Prize and chosen by World Literature Today as one of 60 essential English language works of modern Indian literature. He's also the editor of the Anthology of Indian Fiction, India, A Traveler's Companion, published by HarperCollins. His book reviews have appeared in The National, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Times, and he also contributes columns to all these prestigious dailies and forums such as The Guardian and The New York Times. We welcome you, sir. For the memorial lecture this year, we are joined by Professor Mala Srilal. She's one of our own. Welcome, ma'am. Professor Mala Srilal is the professor of English at the University of Delhi. She retired from her position as the Dean of Colleges and Dean Academic Activities and Projects. During her tenure as the Director of Women's Studies and Development Center, several national and international projects on women's empowerment were carried out with support from the Government of India and UNIFEM. As a recipient of prestigious fellowships, she has conducted her research in Harvard University, USA, Bellagio, Italy, and Newcastle, UK. Focusing on literature of social change, Mala Srilal's specialization is in literature, women, and gender studies, about which she has about 15 books, including The Law of the Threshold, Women Writers in Indian English 2000, In Search of Sita, Revisiting Mythology, Penguin 2009, expanded again in 2018, Achambha, Women's Oral Narratives, Sahitya Academy 2012, Tagore and Feminine, A Journey Through Translation, Sage Publication 2015, Cosmopolitan Space and Counterpoints of Modernity, Sahitya Academy 2018, Finding Radha, The Quest for Love, Penguin 2018. She has been a senior consultant to the Ministry of Culture and member of International Book Award juries. Currently, Professor Mala Srilal is a member of the English Advisory Board of Sahitya Academy and serves on the advisory committee of several universities. Professor Mala Srilal, we are truly honored, ma'am, that you have found time for us and that you have agreed to deliver this year's memorial lecture. We welcome you, ma'am. We also joined by somebody who is considered the Renaissance man of Odia theatre. I'm speaking of Sri Anant Mahapatra ji, and we are very fortunate that he has agreed to chair the session today, and he is with us. His pioneering creativity spanned across theatre, television, cinema, and radio. He was the jury. He served as the jury of National Film Awards, Akashvani Award, Indian Panorama, Odia Sangeet Natak Academy, among others. His association with NFDC, that's National Film Development Corporation, he is associated with that. He was also associated with Central Board of Film Certification, Central Board of Film Censors, Satyajit Ray Film and Theatre Institute, Sangeet Natak Academy, and in that capacity, he has left an indelible and visionary imprint on the direction of theatre and entertainment and television in modern India. Some of the high points, although his career is full of high points, but these are some of the high points, truly high points of his career. In 1983, he wrote and directed Mamu, which is the very first feature-length film on Doordarshan. In 1971, he represented India in World Theatre Congress, London. In 1964, he wrote and directed the feted documentary March of the Flame, and he has been associated with various forums. He is instrumental in the rise of theatre in Odisha, all over India, and he has been a visiting faculty at various prestigious institutions. And might I say, without any exaggeration, that the career of Sri Anant Mahapatra mirrors the career of theatre in modern India. On that note, I welcome you, sir, and I invite you to take the chair and take the proceedings of the day further.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gautam.
It's a pleasure as well as a privilege. Pleasure because I have been associated with Basanta Satpathy Memorial Lecture since the beginning, and privileged to share not only on land, not on earth, but through the universe, all of you. And with such eminence as Professor Mala Srilal and Chandrahas and Manoj Tripathi, who is not only a publisher, he is a person who has led many people to become writers, authors, and accomplish. So I also welcome Manoj. And Chandrahas, of course, is a man of the Bhubaneswar, and I'm sure that I welcome him. He would stop writing about China Dragon and write about Ashoka, about the Ashoka Hotel in Bhubaneswar. Welcome, all of you. And now I'd request Chandrahas to come in and speak about Basanta Satpathy and release the book. But perhaps before that, I should ask Manoj to speak a few words so that we can start the thing by releasing the book. Then Chandra speaks about it, and then Professor Mala Srilal. And then, if the time permits, if all of you are in the mood, I can read a short story of Basanta Satpathy. Manoj.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to welcome everyone.
Hello, Basantji, Manojji.
Really excited to have you all here as participants of this 8th Basanta Satpathy Memorial Lecture. It's wonderful to see all of you here today. Thank you very much for time, participation, and commitment towards literature. This is an honor for me to introduce and welcome respected Chair Sri Anant Mahapatra, who has rose rapidly to the eminence both in literature and theatre. I do welcome as you all know, a great scholar and author. He contributed in disseminating in the inherent values of literature and organizing literary events, workshops, festivals, and doing multiple strategic programs. I welcome renowned novelist Sri Chandrahas, who has agreed to release the new story. We are very lucky to get him in today's. Welcome, Shubhaj, in the English department. Welcome, Bhimita Tuli, and then cordial welcome to Dr. College. Was a great collaborator. It seems last 2 years been Shiksha Sandhan was proud in his honor prior to this. Ma Saraswati selects very few as the medium of disseminate the required knowledge and value system through literature. The eminent personalities gracing and occasion today are among those few. Pakigar Prakashan is privileged to get the grace with the opportunity and acting as a carrier of this knowledge to the last miles as a publisher. As I said, some among those few like Guljar, Kuldeep Nair, Saharia, Virappa Moil, and most eminent writers of our Odisha. Pakhigara's dissemination of their writings in regional language, and we have done that. So I am very much happy and glad that this year our college has I'll again thanks to the principal ARST College and welcome everybody who was participate in this fine evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sir, please unmute yourself. Sir, please unmute.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Chandrahas now can come in. And I think his beard has started turning a little bit gray these days, but it's a beautiful evening for him to start all over again. Okay, come in, Chandrahas. Gautam, are you able to locate him?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Can everyone hear me, Gautam?
Ah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Welcome.
So I was correct. Your beard.
Age affects everyone evenly.
Okay.
But
Most
thank you very
welcome.
much. It's a pleasure to see you all, and I'm very happy to be part of this, especially because for the first time ever, Anantababu and I are kind of at the same event, not as people of different cities, but as neighbors in Bhubaneswar, to which city I've just moved back. And that is one of the reasons why it's a very nice time to be receiving this book, which is the first book I received in the post after returning to Odisha. One of the reasons why I have not been able to join Anantababu at his house, which is what we had planned, was because I'm still in quarantine after having got back from Delhi. But thankfully, for an occasion like this, we can all do it from our own houses. So I just want to say a few words before I give it to Malashri. One, of course, it's a matter of great pleasure for me, as Anantababu also said, and a privilege to be part of some celebration, some commemoration of a very great Odia writer, and to be part of his 8th memorial lecture in his honor. I thought every writer wants to be spoken of when he's done or after he's gone, but I think even more so, he wants his voice to remain alive on the page. And I thought, as a way of starting off today's discussions, I would try and make some comments on the specific nature and the qualities of Basantababu's fiction, especially as a fiction writer myself, by focusing on one of his stories as a way of elaborating the characteristics of his entire work. And I thought I would pick up from among his stories a story which is available in English, and it was published in Indian Literature, the Sahitya Academy Journal, a few years ago. That is a story known in Odia as Kani Chiya, the one-eyed chick. And I'm sure many of you have read the story, probably in Odia. So the outline of the plot of the story is familiar to you. It's a story told with many characters actually, and many frames about and a lot of words in it, including the one-eyed chick of the title, and it moves very swiftly from a child who is taking care of these chicks, a motherless child, and his father. Between them, they've got these chicks that they take care of, and a kite springs on one of them and kills it, pulls it away to its own nest and kills it. And the child is submerged in grief as a result of this. And the father is left there contemplating his own helplessness in the face of what is a kind of murder in the avian world. And what is very beautiful about the story is from this one frame, it moves into a contemplation of the father feels helpless, but he moves into thinking about a brave young boy he had once seen in some past, in some other time in his life, who, when faced with such an invasion of kites, had climbed up a tree, a simuri a tree, and kill these kites by setting fire to the nest. So it's a very violent story with a number of disturbing scenes. But what I find myself admiring in it, is one, as a writer, what I find myself admiring is the daring of Basanta Babu's juxtapositions of different frames and the immediacy and confidence of his transitions. We never feel as if these worlds are artificially grafted onto each other. The story moves very swiftly from one scene to the other and from one time escape to another without any sign of a break in the narration. Also, what is very enjoyable about Mr. Satpathy's work is the sort of scattershot play of allusions in the story to all manner of things, from ancient Sanskrit literature to different aspects of social reality. And in this, sometimes these allusions also meant to comic effect. And I think in this tendency, his work is very reminiscent of the work of the great Odia writer Fakir Mohan Senapati. And because of that, there is a kind of depth of texture to his writing, even in very commonplace observations, that keeps the reader very alert. I don't think you can read one of his short stories and switch off and merely try to follow the course of the immediate plot. There's many references to other kinds of realities in it, and this thickens the texture of the story and makes the writing a pleasure to read. Last, I think what is very impressive about his work is that there's in stories like Gangao, Gangi, Rickshaw Fair, there is a very deep concern for the material lives and the imagination of those who are poor and marginalized, without the story slipping into a kind of one-dimensional naturalism. I mean, even where there is a very sustained attention paid to the lives of, and this is the work of fiction, I always believe, that to expand the frame of human subjectivity and human attention, so that any reader can be aware of the different aspects of the society that he or she lives in. But in his case, there's always a kind of narrative zest and that leavens the story and stops it from becoming monotonal and one-dimensional. And for all these reasons, I think this book and many of the stories in it is part of, one should say, a shelf of the most essential Odia literature of the last century. And I would like to compliment Mr. Banoj for having published a very beautiful edition. This is an edition that any writer would be proud of seeing his own work come out as. And I especially loved the motifs on the front cover. So I hope that soon this book will be in the household of every person who loves Odia literature. And with that, I think I'm going to, I have said my piece and said a few things about why I think here is a fiction writer of very great importance. And thank you so much for having me. And I think I will give way now to Malishri.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandras. Okay, now it's my privilege to call upon Professor Mala Srilal. She is not only known in Odisha. Some people, friends have telephoned me to say that they know her and they are looking forward to hear her. And all of us are looking forward. So without wasting any more time, Professor, welcome. Your yellow brings in the spring.
Thank you very much, Anand Mahapatra. It's indeed a great honor to have you chair my session today. And I'm delighted to see this wonderful book that Shri Manoj Tripathi has put before us. Chandrahas, great to see you and enjoyed listening to your words about Basant Kumar Satpathy's latest collection. Principal Dr. Gyantosh Jha, I'm indeed happy to be with you at ARSD College again. And Professor Sumanyu Satpathy, who brought me into this, my dear friend and colleague. I'm very, very grateful that I've been invited to give this particular memorial lecture. And Gautam Chaubey and your team at ARSD, thank you very much for doing all the tech arrangements. So I hope I'm clearly audible. I want to begin by saying that my introduction to Shri Basant Kumar Satpathy is indeed through the world of his stories, as Chandrahas was just talking about them. These humane, ironic, and absolutely delightful stories, I encountered them in English translation exactly 7 years ago at the launch of that collection, which is titled The One-Eyed Chick and Other Stories. In fact, The One-Eyed Chick is the story that Chandrahas was also commenting about. Now, among one of the stories, this particular one located, which is called the Lit Fest. And in that it shows an aging poet who goes into the arena and is suddenly confronted by a whole lot of young and energetic poets, and he feels a little out of place. Now, when that happens, he quickly changes gear, changes his strategy, and adopts the medium and the vocabulary of the young people, and thereby is able to ride over the crisis of identity and becomes one among the young people. Now, that is the kind of humanitarian understanding and sensitivity that I associate with Shri Basant Kumar Satpathy. And what I think he was very much interested in is the phenomenon of change. And he recorded this in many ways. As a member of the Sahitya Academy, I'm aware of his history of Oriya poetry, which is called Shanchayon, published by Sahitya Academy in 1974. In his stories, he recorded the change that was coming into the environment of Orissa, into villages, into cities, among travelers, and he discussed this change all his life. For that matter, Basant Kumarji also wrote about the change in his own life in his autobiography, which is called Mone Pore, and was published in 2008. So indeed, it's a great privilege for me to present this lecture in his honor, a very renowned literature from Orissa, and the father of my dear friend and colleague, Professor Sumanyu Satpathy. In keeping with Shri Basant Satpathy's areas of interest and his location in Orissa, and for that matter, many of you on the panel, I chose to speak about Shri Radha and call it an unfinished story, because this also is a narrative of change. These are stories of reinventions, humanitarian understanding, and I will also focus on the ecological affiliations with nature, a subject that is of deep interest right now. The groundwork for my talk today is a book that I co-edited with Namita Gokhale, novelist and festival director. And we called this book Finding Radha, The Quest for Love. It was published by Penguin about 1 year ago. So to frame my lecture, I want to talk about the uncertain contexts that are around the story of Radha. To begin with, I want to ask the question, who is Radha? This eternal partner of Krishna that we keep talking about. Let us be very sure that there are no literary references to Radha before the 7th century. And even that 7th century was a great deal of difficulty to actually locate. And I have to thank my friend, Professor Alok Bhalla, to lead us to a woman poet in the 7th century. This is Vidya. And she's been translated by Andrew Schelling. And that is perhaps the first reference that we have to Radha by name. We are aware of the research that has been done by Devdutt Patnaik, many others, Pawan Verma, Jauhar Sarkar, many of them are in our book. And they have established that there is no reference to Radha by name in the Mahabharata or the Harivansha. Whenever Krishna is with the gopis, they are a collective, but there is no one by that name. But there's a very pretty little story where Krishna actually goes up to a gopi who has some dust particles stuck in her eyes, and very gently he blows away that particular kind of disturbance in her eye. Now that's a very tender kind of a scene, very typical of what we understand of the Radha and Krishna legend, but nevertheless this gopi is not named as Radha in this traditional narrative. So the prominence of Radha actually happened with Jayadev's Geet Govind, your Jayadev, Odisha's great writer, Jayadev, an exquisite poem of only 12 cantos, and it was composed in the 12th century. Now, as a feminist scholar, I want to draw attention to the fact that we only hear about Radha's life in conjunction with that of Krishna. We know nothing about Radha's infancy, her early childhood, and we know nothing about Radha after Krishna leaves her and goes away from Vrindavan to Dwarka. So the material that is available for Krishna, as you know, is plentiful about Krishna's youth, about his childhood. We've all heard, sung, and seen the sequence of the Makhan Chori and many other delectable tales. And there's a severe absence of anything corresponding to this in the narratives about Radha. Now, if we don't know much about Radha, I want to take you to the site, the geographical site with which Radha is associated, and that is the village of Barsana near Mathura in Uttar Pradesh. This is said to be the birthplace of Radha, and a temple is supposed to have existed there 5,000 years ago, but actually no, we don't have any ruins or material from that period. What we do know is that in the 16th century, Narayan Bhatt, who was a disciple of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, actually set up the geography of Barsana. So it's a reconstructed geography, and the Vaishnav Sampradaya was very strongly propagating the worship of Radha and Krishna, and we needed a location where the temples could be set up, where the rituals could be practiced, etc. So this is where we have an elaborate temple on Brahma Parvat. We have smaller temples and courtyards. We have palaces, and we have names for some of these places. And the people, Radha's family, gets located in this particular geography. So there is father, Rishabhanu Maharaj. There is mother, Kritida. We, of course, know the daughter, Sri Radharani, and the son, who is Sri Dama. And designated areas recall the episodes of the Radha-Krishna legend, but the stories are from Jayadev 12th century. There's nothing from the 5,000 years that we were earlier told that the story exists. So what are these locations? There is Man Mandir, as you can see the name, is the place where Radha will withdraw when she's in a sulk. There is Mor Kutir, which is the place for the dance of reconciliation. And interestingly, there is a pond which is called Pili Pokhar, yellow pool. And this is supposed to have turned yellow with the turmeric on the palm of Radha when Yashoda Maya is ready to bring her in as a bride into the home. Now, of course, this Haldi ceremony and this wedding never happened. Now, just as we know very little about Radha or the actual place of her birth and the circumstances therein, my next question is, who was Jayadev? And I'm glad that I'm amidst a lot of people in Orissa. Maybe they can find me the answer. We seem to know very little about Jayadev, but we do know about the composition of Geet Govind. But the stories associated with the composition of this great poem are also quite often apocryphal or folk. People in Orissa and Bengal are still squabbling about whether Jayadev was born in Kenduli Sasad in Orissa or was he born in Kenduli in Birbhum, Bengal. Now, of course, where I am with all of you today, I will vote for the Orissa location. But there are other reasons for voting for the Orissa location also when one looks at the beautiful song and dance traditions that have emanated from the Geet Govind. So folklore believes that Jayadev found the inspiration for Radha in his dancer wife, who was Padmavati. So all those erotic rasas which are attributed to Radha are the phases of pleasure and ecstasy that were experienced through Jayadev's relationship with Padmavati, presumably. Now, the way the poem ends, the Geet Govind ends, is again a very tender and a beautiful moment, because this is where you remember Radha is waiting for Krishna all night. Krishna doesn't show up. Very early in the morning, in fact, it's still dark, Krishna shows up and he's obviously got love marks on his body, and Radha knows that he has been with another gopi. She's of course very hurt, very angry, very humiliated, and she does not mince any words in berating Krishna. Krishna is contrite in a certain way, and there are no words that Jayadev, the poet, can think of putting into the mouths of the god. Remember, he is Lord Krishna. He is the Lord of the universe. How can he apologize to a mere village woman, Radha? And as the apocryphal story goes, Jayadev just gives up. He leaves the manuscript on the desk, and he decides to go off for a ritual bath. When he comes back, it seems that Lord Krishna has himself come into the room, picked up the pen of Jayadev, and written those famous lines into the Geet Govinda. Dehi Padapallavam Udaram. Sri Krishna bows down his head at the feet of Sri Radha. And this is then Radha's total surrender and acceptance of Krishna's embrace thereafter. So this is the framework. And as I have said, that these are uncertain contexts, a lot of it apocryphal and folk, and there is lots of research to be done in putting the brickstones under it. So that's the opening of my lecture, and I'm going to proceed, I hope, a little systematically in telling you this unfinished story. There are three subheadings that I will use. One, Radha the lover. Two, Radha and the gender question. And three, Radha the ecologist. So when we look at Radha the lover, she is, of course, a very transgressive character, and that's one of the reasons Namita and I were attracted to writing about her. She breaks all the boundaries of patriarchal codes. She challenges the institution of marriage and lots of assumptions that go with it. We know that she's married. We also know that she is the elder relative of Sri Krishna. We are also aware of how this romance begins, because Radha is given the charge of this mischievous child Krishna, and she takes him into the forest. And as this little play begins between the little child and the mentor, the relationship changes into romance and then to erotica. So this amorous Radha, who breaks every taboo in the patriarchal code, not only gets into a relationship once, but as we know, she repeatedly evades her husband, evades her watchful mother-in-law, decides to completely ignore the censorious community, and she finds her way to her beloved again and again. And the expression of abundant sexuality and passion captures every nuance of romantic love. So I also want to say that there is the secular and the religious that goes together in this story. And if we go into the details of Jayadev's poem, we can see how this interweaving takes place. For instance, the Geet Govind opens with a dedication to Saraswati and Lakshmi, and then the journey sets out. And then in other parts of the poem, as you of course remember, there is the Chirharan episode, the Ras Leela that happens when Krishna is not just in a relationship with only Radha, but he is in a relationship in a mystical manner with all the gopis at the same time. We've seen all the iconography of Krishna in the center and the gopis around him. And then we have seen the iconography of the Chirharan, where he steals away the clothes and the women are caught in an embarrassing situation. Then they realize, what have they to be ashamed about? That this is the God of the universe in front of whom they stand. So many of these things are, of course, known to us, but not too many people are aware of the details of the language, the details of the folklore, and the details of the classical that merge and separate all the time as the story of Radha builds up over time. Now, since my lecture is dedicated to Shri Basant Satpathy and his tribute to Oriya literature, and all of you, many of the panelists are in Orissa or linked to Orissa, I decided today to focus in some detail on the long poem called Shri Radha by Dr. Ramakant Rath, writer, bureaucrat, Padma Bhushan awardee, a poem that he wrote in 1984 and then translated into English because he's also a teacher of literature. Now, what is fascinating for me is that Shri Radha, in the eyes of Ramakant Rath, is a very modern woman. She is an exceptional character who believes in liberation at the same time that she believes in consuming her passion in the expression of her love. She is not awkward about it. The tender moments are very much there, but there is a yearning in the Shri Radha of Ramakant Rath. She wants to discover her own identity. And what is absolutely charming is the soul searching of Radha, the existential dimension as well as the secular dimension to her love, and the vocabulary that Ramakant Rath gives to Radha. So I'd like to read some of this language. It's very hard to give language to a deity, a language to Radha, and Ramakantji does it very beautifully. So Radha speaks, "I know you will leave me someday and never come back. My days before I met you will reappear, and all the relationships I broke will, however much I protest, be reconstructed. I know you will return every day, though in a different body. Throughout the years I have to live, the pain of your absence will be your body then. I would stand at the outskirts of your resplendent life like a ghost, hoping you would put out all lamps and arrive dressed like a seeker of forbidden love." So the forbidden love, according to this Radha, is not just her love. The forbidden love is also that of Krishna towards Radha. And that I find is a beautiful twist to the story. So the Radha-Krishna relationship in this dimension is a fused oneness. There is equality. And in Ramakant Rath's words, "I have come out of my house dressed for our night of love. I have left my last breath so far behind, I can't go back to it." So I, as again a feminist scholar, I want to ask, why have traditional devotees accepted this transgression of Radha, a transgression that breaks all the codes that conventional society admires? Radha was a married woman, but like Meera, Andal, and Lal Ded, she was also a mystical seeker. And maybe it is the seeking for a perfect relationship that lifts up this story to the ethereal realms. But at the same time, I don't want to make it hierarchical. I would like to see the divine Radha and the secular Radha come together on an equal footing with Lord Krishna. So that's how I see Radha as a lover. And I will now move on to my second subtopic, which is Radha and the gender question. Because if a woman's sexual desire is transformed into eternal spiritual longing and submission, the gender question becomes very, very problematic. Because can we have modern readings of Radha which reconfigure the story and show a power equilibrium between man and woman without distorting the mythical narrative? You cannot rewrite the story, but you can reinterpret the story. And this is what happens when we look at the gender question. And this is where I want to say many thanks to art historian Alka Pandey. I think she might be among the people who've logged in today. She has a remarkable essay in our book, which is called Becoming Radha. I also want to address this particular section of my presentation to Professor Sumanyu Satpathy, who has done extensive work on modernism and sexuality. Now, in Alka Pandey's essay, which is both theoretical and gives a lot of visual information, she picks particularly on the episode of cross-dressing, when Radha dons the garments of Krishna and Krishna dons the garments of Radha. And this particular episode is often played out in theater and also painted. In miniature painting, there's a dark Radha and a fair Krishna when it is rendered like this. And as Alka points out, there is the popular lyric which says, Narko Nari Banao, make the lad a lass, and it has the origins in this particular episode. Now, not only does Krishna not mind the gopis dressing him up in a ghagra, in a choli, but in fact, he actually asks for shringar. He says, dress me up in the jewelry, put all the decorations on me. He wants alta, and he actually just enjoys this game of pleasure and fun. And when he demands jewelry and he asks for shringar, Alka Pandey, who's also got a very important book on shringar, points out that in Indian literature, the 16 traditional adornments of a woman not only enhance her beauty, but they're also an arpan or an offering to her beloved, and that this is a very important aspect of shringar. There's a whole ritual that goes into it. So while the retribution of the gopis starts as playfulness, it actually turns into a kind of a divine leela. So I'm again quoting from Alka's sources. Radha, in her turn, and I'm quoting the poetry, she wears his peacock feather, she sports his yellow garment, he wraps himself in her beautiful sari, how charming the sight is. The daughter of Vrishabhanu, Radha, turns into Nand's son, Krishna, and Nand's son becomes Vrishabhanu's girl. So there are several such arguments that are available in the rest of that essay, but I want to turn to comparing this Radha-Krishna cross-dressing episode to the Ardhanarishwar idea, which is so prominent in Hindu iconography. The Ardhanarishwar, half woman, half man, is associated with Shiva and Parvati. But can we not look at Radha and Krishna and their cross-dressing as also an expression of the Ardhanarishwar idea? But again, there is a beautiful and telling detail from Radha's perspective. After they've exchanged garlands and they've had this playful note, Radha tells Krishna that, you know what, you can dress like a woman, you can act like a woman, but what you will never be able to experience as a woman is viraha, the anguish of separation from a beloved. This is an emotion a man will never be able to understand. Now, again, from my feminist perspective, I interpret this as a statement of gender equality while respecting the difference between man and woman. And here we see in the gender question retold from a perspective that Alka Pandey has taken, and it leads on to other kinds of research, that one can look at this relationship as one of equality and not hierarchy. My third sub-theme, which is Radha, the ecologist. And this is an important theme today when we are looking at the corona crisis and learning to reappraise the meaning of what is ecological cohesion, what is ecological balance. And I again want to remind ourselves of Sri Basant Satpathy, his explicit understanding of ordinary people, their relationship with environment, the appearance of birds and animals in so many of his stories. There is this understanding of the harmony of nature that we get in Basant Satpathy's stories. And this understanding of nature is absolutely critical to any discussion of Radha. So I want to explore Geet Govind from the perspective of the rich repertoire of visual and performative arts, which is again the backdrop of a harmonized nature. A couple of examples. Shri Kapila Vatsyayan writes about the Darbhanga Geet Govind. The section is in our book. She introduces the pictorial representations of the Rajasthani miniatures, and many of you have seen them. I have one example right here, very, very common kind of a representation. Now, these miniatures, we tend to ignore them, but see how much of nature there is. So much. Look at all the details. We take these things for granted, but maybe now, post-COVID, we will begin to look at this with more respect. So what we see are pictorial motifs quite often of the doe. And Radha's doe-like eyes, again, a mark of beauty in Indian iconography. But the doe herself also appears in many of those paintings. And quite often we get cuckoos, birds, peacocks, and then as Kapila Vatsyayan points out, that when it is a Mewari artist, then he tends to add the local birds, the chakor and the khanjan. So when we look at the Radha Krishna paintings, let us also look at the nature that is around them. And quite often we see the flora, fauna, the birds and the animals offering all kinds of metaphoric and symbolic interpretations. For example, two other remarkable visual portfolios, the Rasika Priya and the Rasamanjari portfolios, for example, have this arched bower, flowers, and these have dangling garlands. And these also, according to Kapila ji, are signs of the benediction of nature on this love of Radha and Krishna. Now, talking about birds and bees, in many senses of the word, I want to refer to a medieval text which is called Bhramar Geet. And it is translated sometimes as Uddhav's message. It's a very pretty story and a rather disturbing one also. Uddhav is a friend of Krishna. After Krishna leaves Vrindavan, he is not intending to come back. But the gopis, of course, don't know this. They keep waiting for him, and Radha in particular is experiencing viraha, that very difficult rasa, and waiting and pining for Krishna to come back. Krishna sends Uddhav with a message for the gopis to say, I'm not coming back in person, but I am in each one of you. Don't you remember our dance? Don't you remember our play? I am in you. And this is how you will live with me always amidst you. Now, Uddhav takes this rather complex, transcendental, philosophic message to a bunch of women in a village who are untutored and unlettered, and he tries to utter this kind of message from Krishna. And they are very impatient. They can't read. They said, tell us, when is he coming? When is he coming? Is he coming tomorrow? Is he coming day after tomorrow? And he says, wait, wait. He has said he resides in each of you. This, come on, we don't want to hear any of this. We want to know when is he coming. This goes on and on to the extent finally the women just push him away and say, you are like that buzzing bee, the Bhramar. You go round and round in circles, making noises which make no sense, and we don't want to listen to you anymore. Just go away from here. So that's the Bhramar Geet. And Uddhav leaves with a very, very important lesson that he has learned, that the sincerity and honesty of these simple village women is much more precious as a tribute to Krishna than the courtliness and the sycophancy that happens in the political world of kingship and royalty and city living. So much for birds and animals as we get them in painting and we get them in folklore. I want from there to turn to music. Though my name is Malishri, which I understand is a Ragini, a part of Rag Bhairav, I cannot sing. So you will need to just listen to the music that I'm going to quote to you. Now, if we turn to Rabindranath Tagore's Bhanushinghir Padaboli, you know the story of how it was a bit of a prank and the young Rabindranath was getting bored one deep afternoon as the clouds were coming on, probably a day like we have today, just pre-monsoon. And he wrote those famous lines which got to be the opening lyric of Bhanu Singh's Padaboli, Gohono Kushuma Kunjo Majhe, in the dense flowering of the woods. This was the first lyric which became the sequence that we know. Now, the Padaboli, of course, has so much about Radha. It's centered on Radha and very, very beautiful music, which is very amenable to dance. And who in Orissa and in Bengal doesn't remember Sajani Sajani Radhika Lo Dekha Abahu Chahiya, Mridula Gamana Shama Ave, Mridula Gana Gahiya. I'm not going to translate this for the audience here. Now, in our book, Lalit Kumar has an essay on Bhanu Singh's Padaboli. And once again, this beautiful interplay, interaction between Radha and Krishna, we know is going to end in tragedy. Radha knows it also that is going to end in separation and sadness. And Tagore's protagonist, Bhanu Singh, by the way, you know that Bhanu Singh means the same in Bengali as Rabindranath. So Bhanu tells Radha, go wait for him in the last shreds of your innocence, crazy girl, until grief comes to you. This is Lalit's translation and very correctly put. And Radha, yet anticipating sorrow, nevertheless, is very, very aware that the ardor of her relationship is blessed by nature. That's what she values the most. So the river Jamuna, the Tamal forest, the ink blue sky at night, we read about this through generations and centuries of the story of Radha. So much so that even fickle Bollywood is certainly a part of this Radha tradition of music. We have an essay in our book where you can look into the details, but immortal lyrics, which all of you will be able to hum if you wish to. You remember, Mohe Panghat Pe Nandalala Chhed Gayo Re, from Mughal Azam, and then from Sangam, Bol Radha Bol Sangam Hoga Ki Nahi. So we don't get away from Radha ever, ever. Now, I want to come also to the rendering of Radha Krishna through Odissi in dance. And Odissi, of course, is the classical dance form very much associated with the home state of Jayadev. Dr. Sonal Mansingh, Padma Vibhushan, dancer, choreographer, and a deep scholar and somebody I've known for a long time and admired greatly. She's given us memorable performances of the Ashtapadis and focused on Radha's affinity with nature. And again, with Sonalji, it is innovation, it's interpretation, it's perspective to show Radha as a strong character. And in an interview, and I'm quoting Sonalji here, she says, Radha is a grand image, but she's the personification of love without which there is no creation. In our male-dominated mythology, the image of Krishna at the feet of Radha, begging for her love, is most unusual. And yet, Geet Govind invokes a deep spiritual thought packaged in beautifully written verses. So much for what I have to say about Radha and ecology. I now come to the conclusion of my talk, and I'm now concluding with why I think this is an unfinished story of Radha. I'd like to suggest that the inheritance of Radha is such that it can keep taking new and new directions. When we speak about Krishna, we are rooted in tradition and religion and cultural ethnography, which is pretty fixed. But when we speak of Radha, we're entering the gaps and the interstices in that narrative, some of which I have tried to point out. And time has only heightened our awareness of Radha and the reinterpretation that are possible of the so-called illicit romance, because the sexual mores of that patriarchal baggage has also changed, and it is continuing to change all the time. Namita Gokhale and I have done not only this book, Finding Radha, where we talk about the rich repertoire of Indian mythology, but we've also done a book on Sita, and ours is an open-ended story, because we do believe that the living mythology of India is one of the richest sources of narrative in our country, and it is endless. Anybody can enter it at whatever time. and bring something out of those mythological interstices that are left unanswered. So transiting all the way from Vidya in the 7th century to Geet Govind in the 12th century, later on to Surdas, Chaitanya, Vidyapati, Balram Das, and then we come, of course, to Ramakant Rath and Dharamveer Bharti. We have them in our book. Radha has a continuous timelessness and a relevance. Now, once again, I would like to mark my tribute to Sri Bashant Satpathy's stories. The great sensitivity that he shows towards lonely subjects. There's the lonely widower, there is the troubled tenant and his children, there is the reflective commuter in a train. These are iconic images, not only from the part of Orissa, but of lonely people with stories around them. Radha is one such lonely person with stories around her. And I do believe that although she was in a way located in her literary centrality in Geet Govind, in Orissa, she has a pan-Indian presence and efficacy, because remember, she is the consort of the Lord of the Universe, no less than that. So she's local and she's global, she's cosmopolitan, she's universal, call her whatever one wants to, she is enormous. At this point, very briefly, I want to add a personal footnote. I grew up in Jaipur, where there is the Geet Govind is a very prominent presence, and there is the Govind Dev Ji temple in City Palace, which many of you may have visited. There is a charming story of how the idol of Krishna in the Geet Govind temple came to be made. This sculptor, his name was Bajranabha. He tried one piece of marble, chiseled it, couldn't get it right, pushed it aside, brought a second piece of marble, worked very hard, chiseled it a second time, wasn't happy, moved it aside, and picked up a third piece of marble. All this while, according to folklore, there's an elderly Rajasthani woman with a ghungat in front of her who's watching Bajranabha doing this kind of work. And as the third chiseling happens and the face of this person, supposedly the deity, the sthapana will happen afterwards, emerges, she suddenly lifts up her ghumta one little bit and she says, that's him. And Bajranath believes that this is the correct idol of Krishna, and this is the idol of Krishna that gets installed in that famous temple, the Govind Dev Ji temple in Jaipur. So this is the kind of person we're dealing with when we're talking about Radha. She touches the heart of every person, man or woman, whether in a village or in a Chopal or in the city centers or at festivals or at temples, everywhere. And I would like to believe that what she represents is the integrity of love and the power of women. And as the story of Radha, this unfinished story, proceeds into the future, I hope it is this power of womanhood through Radha that will get written about more and more. I thank you very much for inviting me to give this lecture.
Thank you, ma'am, for that really wonderful lecture. With permission from the chair.
Yes, go ahead. I just wanted to say it's a pretty good coincidence that Malasri is talking about Radha. And I have done an entire play on Sridhar by Ramakanta Ratha. Yeah, wonderful. Please go ahead and their question.
Yeah, so thank you, ma'am, for that wonderful talk. It humanizes Radha. It traces the genealogy of the legend of this sacred geography. And in a sense, it makes more relatable the issues that you raised, right from the historicity, facts about androgyny, and the other traditions in India, and the way it shifts with shift of geographical register. It was quite remarkable. Although I'm familiar with that work that you kept mentioning and some of the essays, because Lalit Kumar, who's also joined us today, contributed an essay to that volume. Yet the range and the connections that you do were really amazing. And now the floor is open for, we have time enough for 2 questions or 10 minutes, whichever is shorter. I think there is one commentary, Dr. Nandini Sen. I'll read it out to you, ma'am, for you to respond. This incestual love, which becomes the cornerstone of romance, challenges patriarchy fairly and squarely. I thoroughly enjoyed the way you had cited several literary sources, taking us through the legacy of Radha. It's also interesting how every female deity is addressed as Ma, and Radha is always Sri Radha. Probably that accentuates her feminine stance as she stands out questioning patriarchy, even in contemporary time. Ma'am, would you like to respond to that? About Radha
Yes,
being, yeah.
she is addressed as Sri Radha, and if you go to Vrindavan, it's always Radhe Radhe. So she actually spans a huge range. There are people who say Radha Ma. So she is with women in many capacities, as a friend, as a companion, as a deity, as a goddess, as the woman next door, as a sister, as a mother. So the range is vast.
Right. Is there any, so we have another question from Nishi Pulugrutha. She asks, is there any difference in the way Radha is presented in various parts of India?
There is again not a difference, but a variety. And the way Radha shows up in southern narratives is more like Andal. You know, a young woman who felt completely engrossed by divinity, and the process by which the religiosity of Radha becomes enhanced. Whereas the playfulness, etc., is what shows up more in the North Indian narratives. I'm generalizing, of course. In the eastern part of India, in Orissa and Bengal, is the music and the dance. Even in Bangladesh, is the music and the dance traditions that play out. So it's more the way the tracks of Radha worship have developed are somewhat different, but a very endearing character everywhere.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for those 2 responses. We've only time for 2 questions, and that was the second question. So I would now thank you so much for the wonderful talk,
Thank
and
you.
I'll hand over the proceedings of the day to Sri Anant Mahapatra.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's been not only evening of pleasure, but evening of literature as well. And I don't think it would be really appropriate without reading a story of Basanta Kumar Satpathy. While I read it, I suppose you had a beautiful lady, Malashri, to look at her continuously, and I would keep on looking at her. But I would suggest when I'm reading the book, without looking at my face, you close your eyes and visualize the whole thing. I think that would be more appropriate. So please close your eyes and open your ears. Slightly upbeat. I sat on the side seat of the 5-down express train, crossing my hands in the style of Vivekananda, and kept on enjoying the topless bathing beauty of some tribal woman in the nearby pond of the station. All at once, I felt a soft touch on my elbow. Turning back, I saw it was that young lady. She stood keeping her back at me, and her 1.5 foot long locks fell disorderly on her back. I had been marking for the last 15 days that she used to get into the train from that countryside station. She would come running by the time the train arrived at the station. Short of breath, she sat on my front seat. Her breasts were throbbing up and down. Droplets of sweat were there on her nose, and a thin stream of went down her cheek. My gaze, hard and sharp, was on her changing mood, style, every limb of her. She could not know the charisma of my eyes, as I wore a pair of dark goggles. Today she was with sunglasses too. Although the sun was about to set, the day's heat was still there. There was a delay to get out of the house, she spoke, and wiped her face with a small hanky. As soon as the train halted at the next station, the young lady got down and went to another compartment. Perhaps she was not what I took her to be. Having got the hint of my hunger, she left the place. Was she then a noble breed? Was she married? No, not at all. Then what happened? What happened? Was my gesture obscene? So far as I know, she traveled alone. No one was ever there with her. I was curious. She got down at the destination station and went along the flyover bridge. I saw her and followed her, although I maintained a pace. I could not overtake her. Without bargaining the rate, she straight jumped onto a rickshaw and asked the rickshaw puller in a commanding voice, "Start immediately." The rickshaw puller, like an obedient servant, took her away. Along the half-lighted road, I went to the cycle stand in a hurry to follow her in a hope of ascertaining the moment and her destination. I usually let the 14-year-old cycle stand watchboy, Kalyan, a bit loose at conversation. Chewing a Kimam smeared tobacco-filled beetle, she said with a grim, "Hello, sir. She came ahead of you. Could you recognize her? She has owned a pair of colored glasses, so someone might recognize her. She has returned from Calcutta very recently. She has brought that from Calcutta. She was absent for last 4 or 5 days. Sally tries to hoodwink me." I had apprehended. If the 14-year-old boy was inspired a little more, he would start speaking anything unpredictable. Hence, I left the place and tried to chase the rickshaw, but I was too late. I could not get at it. At some by-lane, the rickshaw got lost. The girl was very clever. It was 8 at night by the time I reached home. Manini opened the door. I saw her lean and worn-out figure, an epitome of pathos, reduced to skeleton. I feel like crying, seeing her after the second issue. Her body weight might be 36 kilos, whereas mine is 72. At the honeymoon night, she perhaps looked like Phool Kumari. It was the girl's name according to the 14-year-old boy. I have devoured half of her, and the rest has been sucked out by the 2 sons. Every day she must be having some other element. We don't meet each other as man and wife at night, but I must admit on oath that Manini loves me more than her life. She has never allowed anything to come on my way. She has all the virtues except she hates sex. Marking my absent-mindedness for a while, she asked, "You must be thinking of something quite serious. I reckon from your face." Have the children gone to bed? I feigned ignorance. I have some work at a place at 9 o'clock and I must not be possible to return. What work? Will you continue the whole night? Oh, you know, the same literary work, I said. What else, if not literary? I thought literature is born out of romance. Maybe I can get some ideas for a story. What are you? She asked. A writer or a passionate lover? Artists, poets, storytellers are all lovers. They are all critics. In a sense, aesthetician. They dwell in aesthetics. Are you yet to know me? By any means. I have to find out the theme of a story tonight. Don't you believe me? Hiring a rickshaw, I went straight to Hotel Apsara. The hotel manager guessed everything from my gesture. He arranged a corner room for me and looked forward to taking the order. I went straight to my room. I was on bed, changing the sides now and then. It was 11 o'clock. As I opened the door, the lady entered with a gush of aroma of jasmine. She closed the door and bolted from inside without any hesitation or bashfulness. What a surprise! She is the very lady that I had seen on the train. Took her to the most solicited sex. A garland of fresh jasmine flower around the synonym made it significant. Such type of experience in such an environment was entirely new to me. Giving a glance at me, she switched off the light, keeping the bed lamp burning. Without waiting for me, she took off her printed sari, hung it on the wooden frame of the mosquito net, made some meaningless movements in the room. At that moment, I was thinking, then collecting myself, I began chatting. I knew her name. The 14-year-old boy had told me. Still, I asked, your name? Phool Kumari, she said, without hiding it. Where are you? Where do you see me? The answer seemed to be a little uncommon. Going a step ahead, I kept her small hand on my palms. She said, are you afraid? No, a reply came from my parched throat. You see, I'm not an ordinary customer of yours. I want to know certain things about you first. Other things will come after that. Since the day I saw you, I've been curious about you and your life. It is by chance we met again. I have some information about you from others. It is too much. Say no more. Would you like to listen to a song? See, I have a condition with you. You have brought me with money. You may do anything you like with that purchased commodity. But I can't stay a moment after it is struck 3. I have to take up the Janata Express, for I have some urgent work at village. I asked, after looking at you, what you were thinking? What was in your mind? I was not thinking anything at all. I didn't want to make you one of my customers. Oh, how much money will you get? Your guess is not correct, sir. I think of money because I need it. I don't think about any other thing. That is a common phenomenon. I don't believe that this body has any hunger. Do you ever think of eating if there is no appetite? Then what do you think? I think of my fate, of my house, and my two brothers, and those cursed villagers. I don't worry about me and the home. This is the hen's coop, wherever it spends the night. It forgets about the house. It spends the night at the daybreak. Since when did you take this profession? And why did you do it? That's a long story. You won't gain anything out from that. I had no other way. My father, mother passed away one after the other in a gap of 1 month when I was in class 11. They provided the school expenses working as daily laborers. God knows what difficulties I have faced to bring up the two brothers. And to my bad luck, a person from Calcutta had come. He took me to Calcutta, giving me hope of making me a typist. It's no good telling you what happened there. Somehow I escaped from there and came here to die a daily death. I felt her hand colder. I was ashamed and afraid for that. I thought no warmth would ever come back to me. I decided not to ask anything further, as the girl was telling a passively, full of pity. I got up, and she also got up, without understanding anything. Embracing her for a while, I kissed her sweetened lips and said, "You will catch the Janta Express, won't you? Go. I've given you due of 100 rupees to the manager. Think that I brought that money for you instead of giving it to my wife. Go, please go. Cure your two brothers first." She saluted me and left the room, closing the door. Manini at 4 o'clock opened the door and greeted me by bringing in the smell of the hotel, as I had brought the fragrance of jasmine flowers into the hotel room, opening the door for Pul Kumari. Never in my life had I felt so exhausted, so frightened, so ashamed. Pathos overtook me, welling tears in my eyes. I was about to cry. Looking at me, she understood, and at once I was in a very tight corner. She, sitting on the sofa near the door, had been waiting for me throughout the night. Her pale eyes had sunken deeper. She asked me to sit down in the drawing room instead of going in. Perchance the sleeping children might be disturbed. In a way, as if falling before Manini, I said, "Please sit for a while. I have many things to tell you." And then I narrated the entire story without concealing any bit of it. I confessed all about how I have behaved with her and how I made a secret donation to Pul Kumari. I told her and sobbed like a child. Manini, in a way of counseling, said, "You are not to blame. All are of the same mind. We, the women, are destined to suffer as a marital bond based Otherwise, there is no difference between Maninis and Phulkumaris. You gave the money to Phulkumari to maintain her two brothers, which you would have given me for real two children. Her voice began to choke, and 2 drops tear rolled down her cheek. Controlling herself, she said, all through my life, to rear your children, I've been doing the same thing with you exactly as what Phulkumari does, moving here and there to maintain her brothers. Was there any significant difference between the two? No. Both are obscene. One was more, and the other was slightly less. Okay, thank you for your patience.
Thank
All
you
right,
so much. I think it was back in 2014 when I first heard you read a story, and that dramatic reading had another dimension. There were also some light effects, which unfortunately we couldn't arrange under the circumstances. But a writer brings a story to life, and it's truly in your voice and in your style that the story got animated and came to life, and closed our eyes and you could visualize everything, and it's just so remarkable.
What does Chandras or Balashri have to say?
Professor Balashrilal, ma'am.
Wonderful. You really brought out the characters and the environment. Beautiful reading, and the sound effects were very well chosen.
Chandras I don't see him.
Chandrahas ji had to leave. He had a meeting.
Yeah, okay, fine. I think now it is time. We have crossed the time limit also. More than an hour and a half.
So thank you so much, sir, for that wonderful rendition, for the wonderful reading. And for many of us, I'll exclude myself from that list because, like I said, I heard you once earlier. It was a wonderful experience, another way of reading a story. I'd also like to thank Professor Balashrilal with reference to 2 comments that I see in the chat box. A comment by Prerna Sinha ji, who says your extended research presents Radha a fully emancipated and a mystical woman, and Preeti Singh, who says found Radha very interesting. Radha was, to quote Pope, was often thought, but never so well expressed, never so well researched. So thank you, ma'am, for that really inspiring talk. I also thank Chandrahas Chaudhary for joining us here, for lending his weight, for kind of acting as a bridge between Indian English fiction and literature written in Indian languages. We also thank Manoj Kumar Tripathi, the proprietor of Pakshighar Prakashini, for supporting Odia writers, for supporting regional literature, for doing so much. And it's commendable work. I think with similar support, with similar publishers, all literatures in most Indian languages are likely to flourish, and we need people like you. I like to thank our principal. This is not a mere formality. We are here connected on this platform literally because he sent me a message with a picture of Balashrilal saying that why can't we have her over to our college? Why can't we invite her for a talk? And as fate would have it, everything was planned, and we could collaborate with Pakshighar Prakashini and with Anand sir and with Chandrahas ji and have this wonderful session. I also like to thank our webinar team, Ravindra Pantji, Dr. Vinita Tuli. Without you people, it's impossible to have seminars, and it was because of you, because Professor Sumanyu Satpathy had seen the efficiency and the glitch-free arrangement that you people have managed to make. That emboldened us to collaborate with the college, that emboldened Pakshighar Prakashini to collaborate with the college. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful host. And Any final word? I think I'll request Sri Anant Mahapatra to say a final word before we call it
Well, the
today.
final word should always be short and sweet. So it should be bhalo thako, bhalo baso. Love, love.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Part of Sri Radha also.
So on behalf
now
of
we can, yes.
on behalf of ARSD College, all the team, all the faculty members, all the students, and Pakshikar Prakashini, I thank everyone who's been involved with us, who've joined us for this wonderful session, and hopefully, maybe 9th Basant Satpathy Memorial Lecture, we can have the same platform once again, and same people. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.